The first thing she noticed about the human station was how loud it was without making any sound. The hum of recycled air, the vibration of metal panels, the constant low-level chaos of humans moving with casual disregard for protocol, it all pressed against her senses in a way that made her frill twitch. She reminded herself that she was a professional, a cultural attaché, a trained observer of emerging civilizations, not a walking biological disaster waiting to happen. Her species reproduced through impulse bonding. It was efficient, immediate, and deeply regulated. Attraction was not romantic, not emotional, and certainly not accidental. It was a biological switch flipped only under sanctioned conditions, monitored by medical staff and overseen by legal authority. Anything else was messy, dangerous, illegal. Humans, according to every briefing she had studied, were messy by default. She straightened her posture, smoothed the fabric of her uniform, and activated her translator as the airlock cycled open. This was a routine assignment. Cultural exchange. Observe, document, return home with a report full of polite confusion and mild concern. That was all. Then the human stepped forward to greet her. He was unremarkable by galactic standards. No bioluminescence. No defensive spines. No pheromone plumes. Just soft features, expressive eyes, and a posture that suggested equal parts confidence and uncertainty. He smiled, which the briefing had described as a non-hostile facial contraction meant to signal goodwill. Her internal systems immediately disagreed. A warm surge rippled through her core, sharp and sudden, like a misfiring circuit. Her legs tensed before she could consciously react, muscles aligning into a posture she had not assumed outside a licensed bonding chamber. Her breath caught. Her vision sharpened. 1,000 biological indicators lit up in silent alarm. Absolutely not. She took a step back, nearly colliding with her own luggage. Apologies, she said too quickly, translator smoothing the edge of panic from her voice. Minor adjustment period. New gravity ratio. The human blinked. Oh. Yeah. Happens to everyone. You okay? He was closer now. Too close. The warmth intensified. Her instincts screamed proximity, alignment, completion. This was impossible. Humans were not listed as compatible. They were not even classified as attractive. They were supposed to be emotionally volatile mammals with inefficient mating rituals and alarming eye contact. Her knees weakened. Before she could process another thought, the air between them shimmered and split open, projecting a tall, translucent figure in sterile monochrome. It adjusted an invisible tie and cleared its throat with the sound of a disappointed filing clerk. Notice of violation, the hologram intoned. Impulse Bonding Protocol, subsection 12, clause 4. Unauthorized physiological response detected in proximity to a non-registered species. She froze. The human recoiled. What? Her frill flared in mortified horror. This is highly irregular. The hologram scrolled text no one else could see. Irregularity noted. Context irrelevant. Penalty assessment pending. This is my first hour here, she hissed under her breath. Surely there is a grace period. There is no grace period, the hologram replied pleasantly. There is only compliance. The human looked between them, eyes wide. Am I in trouble? No, she said immediately, perhaps too forcefully. You are not the problem. Her legs chose that moment to shift again, angling her stance in a way that made the human's ears turn red. The hologram made a small ticking sound. Secondary infraction, it said. Failure to suppress posture. She clenched every muscle she had. I am suppressing. Incorrect. The human took a cautious step back, hands raised. Okay. I can leave. I don't want to, cause an interstellar incident. Something in his tone, apologetic, considerate, genuinely concerned, cut through the chaos. The warmth softened, changed. Not vanished, but steadied. That only made it worse. No, she said, then paused, recalibrated. I mean, There is no need. This is an internal matter. The hologram leaned forward. All matters are internal until documented. She closed her eyes and took a controlled breath, cycling through suppression techniques drilled into her since adolescence. Visualize cold stars. Focus on data streams. Detach emotion from instinct. It worked. Mostly. The warmth receded to a low hum instead of a raging flare. She opened her eyes to find the human watching her with an expression that was not fear or desire, but curiosity. So, he said carefully, first contact jitters? She let out a sound that might have been a laugh if she were less dignified. Something like that. The hologram flickered. Monitoring will continue. Of course it will, she muttered. As they began walking down the corridor together, professionally distanced, meticulously appropriate, she became acutely aware of one terrifying truth. This had not been a random misfire. Her biology had not mistaken him for something else. It had recognized him. And whatever that meant, she had a feeling the fine print was going to be a nightmare. By the second day, she had developed a strategy. The strategy was avoidance. She rerouted schedules so that meetings were always held in open spaces with at least 4 witnesses, 2 recording devices, and 1 potted plant between her and the human at all times. She requested transparent walls. She insisted on standing desks. She learned the station's cafeteria layout by heart so she could choose tables that maximized distance while still appearing polite. None of it worked. If anything, the warmth intensified. It was worse when she could see him without directly interacting. Her instincts did not care about line-of-sight rules or professional posture. They reacted to his presence the way a tide responds to a moon, subtle, inevitable, humiliating. Her legs would tense, her center of balance would shift, and she would have to lock her joints like a malfunctioning service droid just to remain upright. Every single time, the hologram appeared. Sometimes it manifested beside her shoulder. Sometimes directly between them, which was deeply unfair. Once, during a briefing with 6 other humans, it projected itself upside down for reasons it refused to explain. Notice of pattern recognition, it said during their 3rd meeting of the day. Repeated proximity has resulted in recurring impulse escalation. I am aware, she snapped internally. You do not need to announce it. Announcement is mandatory, the hologram replied. Privacy is not. The human cleared his throat. Is it talking about me again? She forced a calm expression, her frill betraying nothing. It talks about everything. That seems stressful. You have no idea. She tried distraction next. If she kept him talking, about trade agreements, human art, their alarming reliance on caffeine, perhaps her biology would focus elsewhere. It did not. Instead, she found herself genuinely interested. Humans spoke in tangents, layered emotion into jokes, and treated serious topics with unsettling warmth. He listened when she spoke, not just to respond, but to understand. That was new. Dangerous. During a scheduled cultural exchange, she demonstrated a traditional greeting ritual from her homeworld, carefully modified to remove all intimate components. The human mirrored her movements with earnest concentration, brow furrowed in thought. Like this? He asked. Yes, she said, then felt her knees weaken as her instincts misinterpreted the mirrored posture as alignment. The hologram popped into existence with a sharp chime. Notice of near violation, it said. Preemptive warning issued. I didn't do anything, she protested. You thought about it, the hologram replied. Thoughts are adjacent. The human blinked. I'm starting to feel personally attacked. You are not, she said automatically, then hesitated. I think. He smiled, small and crooked, and something in her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with impulse bonding. That realization unsettled her more than the biological response ever had. That night, alone in her assigned quarters, she accessed the interstellar legal database. If the protocol lawyer insisted on constant monitoring, then she would meet it on its own battlefield. She searched for exceptions, loopholes, ambiguities. There had to be something. No law was perfect. Especially not one written by her people, who believed efficiency was the highest virtue. She found nothing. Impulse bonding was described as automatic, non-negotiable, and dangerous when misdirected. Emotional attachment was mentioned only once, in a footnote, described as a theoretical complication with no documented cases. She stared at the line for a long time. The next day, she adjusted her approach. If proximity triggered the response, perhaps reframing it would help. She reclassified their interactions in her report as anthropological immersion. She requested additional one-on-one sessions under the guise of cultural accuracy. The hologram objected loudly, citing suspicious frequency metrics. This is research, she argued. Research does not require locked doors, the hologram replied. They are not locked. They are closed. The human arrived for the session with a tablet and a hopeful smile. So, what are we immersing in today? Conversation, she said, then immediately regretted the simplicity of that answer. They talked about nothing important and everything that was. He told her about Earth's oceans, about music that made no sense but felt right, about how humans often did things not because they were efficient, but because they mattered. She found herself sharing things she had never included in an official report: what her homeworld sky looked like at dusk, how impulse bonding felt when it was supposed to happen, how calm followed certainty. Her instincts responded differently this time. Still present, still insistent, but layered with something softer. Slower. The hologram appeared, hesitated, and then adjusted its posture. Anomaly detected, it said. Response intensity inconsistent with standard impulse pattern. She straightened. Explain. Unable, the hologram replied. Data insufficient. The human chuckled nervously. Is that good? She considered the question carefully. I do not know. The warmth surged again when he leaned closer, not invading her space, just present. Her legs threatened betrayal. She clenched them together, breast shallow, heart racing. I should go, he said softly, noticing her struggle. I don't want to make this harder. That did it. The warmth didn't spike. It settled. Her instincts quieted, confused by his restraint. For the first time since arrival, she felt something like control. As he turned to leave, the hologram flickered, processing rapidly. Observation noted, it said. Human subject displays non-triggering behavior. She watched the door close behind him, chest tight for reasons that defied classification. This was no longer just a violation waiting to happen. It was something the protocol had never prepared her for, and the fine print, she suspected, was about to get very complicated. She hadn't planned on rebelling. That was the whole point of being a cultural attaché: follow protocol, maintain order, observe, report, and leave before personal complications could arise. But somewhere between her third intercepted impulse flare and the human's careless laughter over some trivial human custom, she realized that the rules were no longer sufficient. Not for her. Not for him. Not for whatever strange, chaotic thing was happening between them. The holographic protocol lawyer flickered into existence as usual, arms crossed and expressionless. Notice of continued infractions, it intoned. Recurrence exceeds threshold. Escalation advised. She pinched the bridge of her nose, careful not to flare her frill. Escalation is unnecessary. It is required, the hologram replied. Internal consistency mandates disciplinary review. Recommendation, separation, immediate if possible. I am not leaving. Directive cannot be overridden, it said, voice flat, as if quoting law itself from memory. She ignored it and turned toward the human, who was looking at her with that same combination of curiosity and mild terror that had become so familiar. Sit, she commanded softly, though the word carried far too much weight in the room. He did tentatively, on the edge of the examination table, or whatever human furniture was closest to a respectable sitting position. Listen, she said, lowering her voice. I need to tell you something. It's complicated. He tilted his head, expression cautious but open. I think I can handle complicated. She exhaled, mentally reviewing everything she had been taught about impulse bonding. About legality, morality, procedure. About biology. My species, we are supposed to bond automatically. Instinctively. Legally. Efficiently. Emotion doesn't factor. But with you, she faltered. That was the problem. Words were failing, because her thoughts had become messy. Emotional. Improper. You like me? He asked, and she almost snapped at him to maintain decorum. Almost. Instead, she realized it wasn't a question in the human sense. It was something softer, more curious, the kind of question that demanded honesty. Yes, she admitted, almost whispering. But not in a way my species would understand. It's voluntary. Intentional. Confusing. He chuckled, leaning back. So you're rebelling against your entire civilization because of me? Not because of you. She corrected sharply, then immediately softened. With you. Somehow it's with you. The hologram floated nearby, flickering violently. Error. Emotional attachment outside sanctioned parameters. Unable to classify. Recommend immediate action. Ignore it, she said firmly, surprising even herself. She had never dared contradict protocol before. Never allowed her own instincts, let alone her emotions, to dictate action over law. He looked at her incredulously. You're serious? Yes, she said. I've reviewed every clause. Every footnote. Every loophole. There is none. But this, us, cannot be governed by them. Not now. Not ever. The human grinned nervously. That sounds revolutionary. Chaotic, she corrected, trying to keep her voice calm even as her heart hammered. And dangerous. Sounds like my kind of thing, he said. Her breath caught. He had a way of saying things that simplified the impossible. That made interstellar law seem like a suggestion, rather than a set of life-or-death rules written by centuries of overcautious bureaucrats. She felt her legs betray her again, aligning instinctively, though this time, she didn't fight it. The warmth, the pressure, the undeniable pull, it was there, but tempered by intent. By choice. The hologram's tone became shrill. Violation escalation imminent. Emotional contamination classified as level 4. Recommend intervention. I am intervening, she said sharply, cutting it off mid-sentence. I am the authority here. And I am redefining bonding parameters. Effective immediately. What does that mean? He asked, still half joking, half concerned. That it can be voluntary. That it can be consensual. That I choose to. Her words stopped abruptly as the warmth surged again, stronger, insistent, demanding. She inhaled sharply, letting the tension roll through her without fear. That I choose to allow this. The human's hand hovered over hers, unsure. So, I'm not in trouble? Only with yourself, she said, and for once, the words felt honest and weightless. The hologram sputtered. Processing invalid. No classification exists. Cannot compute. She laughed softly, a sound that was entirely human, entirely alien, and entirely theirs. The human smiled, and for the first time, she realized that the chaos of her biology, the bureaucracy, the legal threats, they were all secondary to this moment. To the fact that she could choose. That she could feel. That she could care. Looks like you broke interstellar law, he teased lightly. No, she said, leaning a fraction closer. I rewrote it. And in that small act of rebellion, small for the galaxy, monumental for her, she discovered something she had never been trained for: desire tempered by choice, connection built on trust, chaos made manageable by affection. The human's presence, once a trigger for uncontrolled biological response, now became a partner in equilibrium. The hologram's voice finally faltered into silence. Systems froze. Data streamed wildly and then halted. There were no precedents for what she had just done. None. And she found herself smiling, not at the human, not at the absurd legal apparatus, but at the possibility that she had just made an entirely new category of existence possible, one where she could follow her heart and still stand accountable for herself. The human laughed nervously, as if sensing the absurdity of the situation. So, does this mean we're allowed to talk without holograms yelling at us? Yes, she said, settling into the moment. And perhaps even enjoy it. The hologram flickered one last time, projecting a tiny banner reading, "Error, cannot control evolution." And she realized, with a mix of relief and amusement, that sometimes the best rebellion was just to keep walking forward, hand in hand with the chaos, fully awake and fully willing. Her species had prepared her for impulse, for law, for efficiency. But no one had prepared her for choice. And now, in the middle of an alien station with a human who didn't fit any regulation, she finally understood, sometimes love was the loophole, and sometimes breaking protocol was exactly the right thing to do. And for the first time, she didn't feel guilty at all. The aftermath was quieter than she expected. The station hummed with the usual activity, humans bustling, machinery whirring, but she moved through it with a strange sense of calm. The holographic protocol lawyer no longer appeared at every corner, no longer punctuated her interactions with legal jargon and looming threats. It had been downgraded to a passive advisory, a faint projection that flickered intermittently like a stubborn notification nobody wanted to deal with. She glanced at the human across the atrium, leaning casually against a railing, tablet in hand, watching a group of young humans argue over the correct way to prepare coffee. He caught her gaze and gave a small, crooked smile. That smile, the one that had made her legs betray her on the very first day, still carried the same unassuming power. It was unremarkable in appearance, yet entirely disarming. Galactic Oversight had reviewed her actions, of course. There had been reports, forms, emergency communiques. The committee had been scandalized, horrified, confused, and ultimately amused. Their decision, once the facts had been presented, was unprecedented, a special exception for human-adjacent bonding, pending further observation and a detailed report on emotional contamination phenomena. The irony of humans rewriting alien law through sheer presence was not lost on her. She sat in her quarters, reflecting on the last few days. The warmth, the biological misfires, the relentless interruptions of the hologram, and finally the moment she had chosen autonomy, all of it felt surreal. And yet, it had been transformative. She realized that instinct alone could not define her actions, affection and choice could coexist. Her impulse-bonding biology was no longer a shackle but a tool to be guided, a wave to ride rather than an avalanche to endure. The human had been nothing if not patient. Curious, gentle, humor-infused. He had navigated alien customs, bizarre terminology, and legal interruptions with an adaptability that seemed uniquely human. While her species prized efficiency, structure, and predetermined outcomes, he had brought flexibility, empathy, and an unexpected sense of humor to every interaction. Somehow, in defiance of interstellar regulation, he had reminded her that emotional intelligence could be a form of power as potent as any legal authority. Later, they met in the observation deck overlooking the human station's docking bay. Stars stretched infinitely, flickering against the void, a reminder of the vast universe that seemed indifferent to their personal chaos. He leaned closer, careful to respect her space, and said, "So, are we officially allowed to interact without a hologram yelling at us?" "Yes," she replied, though the word felt inadequate. "And perhaps more importantly, we are allowed to redefine what interaction means." He laughed softly, the sound echoing faintly in the quiet chamber. "Rewriting interstellar law through personal choice. Not a bad first project." She tilted her head, considering the absurdity of it all. Her species had trained her for obedience, for precision, for regulated passion, and yet here she was, in full knowledge of biological risk, legal risk, and social improbability, standing beside a human and feeling entirely, freely, herself. The concept of rebellion no longer seemed frightening, it was liberating. The hologram flickered again, briefly appearing beside them, but only to display a blinking advisory. "Observation mode, optional." She allowed herself a small smirk, appreciating the irony. It had been a relentless presence, a symbol of authority and order, and now it had been reduced to an optional annoyance. "Funny," the human said, glancing at it. "Even your robots can't handle us." She laughed, the sound a little lighter than usual. "It seems humanity has a way of breaking things just by existing. Interstellar law, alien protocol, even stubborn artificial intelligence." He raised an eyebrow. "Do you think that's a good thing?" She considered it carefully. "Sometimes. When the alternative is a universe dictated entirely by rules and instinct, chaos guided by intention can be remarkably beautiful." For a moment, they both watched the stars. Her legs relaxed, her instincts calmed, and yet a thrill of warmth lingered, tempered by the choice she had exercised and the trust she had extended. She realized that this was the essence of what she had been missing: desire combined with consent, instinct softened by affection, and law balanced by autonomy. He reached out, and their hands brushed lightly, a gesture without ceremony but loaded with meaning. It was a simple touch, yet it carried the weight of countless cultural, biological, and emotional boundaries that had been crossed, reshaped, and finally reconciled. She allowed herself to enjoy it, to acknowledge it, without fear, without hesitation. The station continued its endless hum, humans and aliens moving past them, unaware of the small revolution taking place in one quiet observation chamber. They did not know that a human had managed to bend alien law, challenge biology, and teach a cultural attaché about choice, emotion, and connection, all without intending to do so. She looked at him, truly looked, and realized that what they had started here was more than a rebellion or an infraction. It was a foundation, a subtle but irrevocable bond that respected instinct and choice equally. And in that recognition, she felt something profoundly human: hope. The hologram flickered one last time, and in its brief, hesitant presence, she could almost hear it sigh. She smiled. The universe could regulate everything except this, except what they chose for themselves. That, she thought, was exactly how it should be. And so, hand in hand with chaos, affection, and human ingenuity, she allowed herself to imagine the possibilities, knowing that whatever the galaxy thought, whatever the protocols dictated, they had already created something new. Something their species might study for generations. Something that, in quiet defiance, celebrated the unpredictable brilliance of being alive. The stars outside stretched on, infinite and unjudging, and she knew, without doubt, that she had never been more ready to live in their light.